Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight. I'm Judith Krober. You have asked, and we have listened. Tom Montalk is back. His website is montalk.net. I will put his bio into the description box, his website, his YouTube channel, anything you need to know and where to find it. I'm very happy to have him here because Tom is a treasure trove of information about all things occult. He has a very clear understanding what this system is without being caught up in the drama. And that, my friends, is rare. It's almost non-existent. So, Tom, welcome back.
Thanks. It's good to be back.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had one question from a listener. Can we do that before we
Sure.
jump into our topic?
Mm-hmm.
She talked about because last time we talked about sleep paralysis and so forth, and she had an experience. It was not a sleep paralysis, but she felt as if she's moving in slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
And it had to do with shadow people and a headman, and that they tried to kill her on the astral plane.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a while, they pushed her back into 3D.
That's interesting. I wonder, see, it's interesting because I did know a guy who, maybe I mentioned this last time and I'm not sure, but he challenged the shadow people to a fight because he was kind of cocky. And so he didn't expect anything to happen, but that night he went to sleep and he found himself getting pulled out of body and being dragged away towards the bedroom door by shadow people. And he was trying to fight to get back to his body, but he couldn't. And his girlfriend woke up and heard him gasping and was trying to shake him awake, but he wouldn't wake up. So it took a pretty strong struggle, and finally he broke free and he was able to get back in his body, and then he woke up. So that was one case of it. And there's also a really good documentary called, what's it called, Nightmare? Yeah, I think it's called Nightmare. It's all about shadow people and, dark, negative sleep paralysis type experiences. And it mentions in there the hat person and also the hat man and also the shadow people. And the hat man, the kind of hat that he's wearing, seems to be some sort of a 1600s type, pilgrim type hat, I guess. That time period, and possibly also a cloak, I think, and that came a little bit later in time. But it's possible that back then they had a lot of different types of people that were into occultism, Satanism, things like that. And if there's someone who was strong enough that after death, he not only made bargains with demons while he was alive, but he had enough occult power that he was able to maintain his form throughout the centuries and only grow stronger. That this is the type of person that would go around trying to either snatch souls or destroy them or punish them, torture them, something like that. Now it's interesting in this case that that these beings try to they actually brought her back into 3D, because normally they would actually try to take away the soul like permanently, and then the person either dies in their sleep or I guess in some cases, if it's allowed, an actual other entity takes the place of that soul, which is a kind of a scary thing to think about. But as far as like moving in slow motion, yeah, that happens sometimes if you wake up into your into a slight out of body state, and your etheric or astral body is still too close to the physical body. There's a very strong bond between the two. So it's like a cross between your physical body being completely paralyzed and your etheric body being mobile but still linked to that physical body. So there's a magnetic pull. So that's why a lot of times in astral projection they tell you, if you're going to do it, as soon as you get into that state, go ahead and go away from your body as far as you can. Now I myself don't take that risk because I don't want. I mean, I'm already under occult attention, quite a bit, like negative attention. So I don't want to loosen the bond between my soul and my body prematurely, because if I get snatched away, I mean, who knows what I'll be talking on camera next time, right?
Yeah. So did I understand that correctly, that we can get killed in the astral and then in 3D our body will die?
Yeah, so when we say can, it's possible, but the thing is, it varies from person to person depending on their karmic patterns and vulnerabilities. What level of protection they have by coming here, and also their vibrational state. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So it's not like just anyone can get taken away and have that happen to them. Like in her case, she got brought back, right? So
Mm,
whether it was them doing it willingly or if they were forced to by some protective power, who knows? You know. So she
mm,
made it out safe, and that other guy that I mentioned, he made it out safe. So it's not like everyone who gets approached by them gets taken and replaced, right?
mm,
But the thing is, if someone is weak enough, if they have enough vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities they happen over a very long time period, like a person goes into depression, and maybe they even try to attempt suicide, for example. Um, then that in itself is kind of like a giving permission, like I don't want to be here anymore. So if you say that, and you mean it deeply enough for a long enough period of time, sometimes these occult predators can come in and take advantage of that permission. So, and if anyone out there has done that already, I mean, it's just as simple as saying, no, I do want to live. And you affirm the intention to live, and that you ask for divine protection. And then, you pretty much seal off that possibility. But not everyone has done that. Not everyone cares to do that. And some people don't even believe in occult stuff. But they're, for example, a famous author, or, just someone who's influential. And anyone like that is already under the attention of such forces, to be influenced, or in some cases completely replaced,
mm,
at the spiritual level or at the occult level. So, these things do happen sometimes. It's just that you're not as vulnerable as you might think you are based on what we just said. That's all. So don't
mhm.
worry about it too much.
Yeah. When you said when you are coming in, do you think that they monitor who's coming in, let's say the soul codes?
Yeah, I think so. Because when I was a kid, here I'm talking about, just as an example, alien forces. Okay, so I had quite a number of alien experiences when I was a child in Germany, and my family didn't have any military connections. My mom, okay, yeah, so she does have some psychic abilities that she got from her mother, so there's a genetic component there. But at the same time, I think based on what happened back then and just the level of it, I have a feeling that they could either scan the soul or maybe scan a person's probable futures. So they already knew, for example, that I might be into what I'm doing right now, and so therefore they either wanted to curtail it, or if some of them were positive forces, I guess to help it out too, right? So yeah. I mean, so if aliens can do it, I think occult forces can do it too. I mean, they can, like for example, right? People who get nightmares that are induced by negative entities, a lot of times these nightmares actually incorporate elements of of your own, I don't know, your own emotional traumas, your own shadow material, maybe things you've seen over the past week that might have disturbed you, that got lodged in your subconscious. So these thought forms, these energy patterns in your, these signatures in your energy field, they're already floating around you. And these entities, if they're psychic enough, they can look at your energy body, they can see that, and it's more like, okay, well, here's a thought form that's kind of scary. Let's squeeze that, and then it triggers it inside the dream to create that particular nightmare. And it's something that's very effective. So they know all your emotional buttons, okay? And if they can do that even right now during your everyday adult life, then I'm sure that when you're a kid, they can also see your uh, what things scare you most, what ways to get at you, and they can tell who's who, and also not to mention just the brightness of your soul based on the level of your spiritual, uh, I don't want to say development, but strength, when you're a kid. Because I mean, not all souls are at the same experience level. So the ones that come in with, that shine the brightest, I guess, they also attract the most attention sometimes, depending on what they're here for in life. Sometimes these souls that are the brightest, they also have the most protection too. So, there are these positive souls out there who really don't get any negative occult stuff. But in my case, I got quite a bit of it. And partially probably because my higher self realized, okay, well, it's not going to kill you, and the experiences that you're going to get by overcoming your fears are going to help you later in life when dealing with these things for real as an adult. So that's why right now, if these things try to happen to me, it doesn't really phase me emotionally, just because I've been through so much of it that I've sort of grown desensitized to it. So
Mhm. Okay, thank you very much for
sure.
that. So today we wanted to talk about synchronicities. And so that everybody is on the same book, please define synchronicities for us.
Okay, so synchronicity, of course, is a meaningful coincidence.
Mm.
So it's not just any coincidence. It's something that means either something to you personally, or has a message behind it, or has a symbolic meaning to it. That if you were to look it up, let's say in a dream dictionary, it actually pertains to your situation. So and the thing about synchronicities is they're personal proof that reality is more than what the mainstream, of course, tries to let it on to be. They say that the universe is just a big machine. If you were to ask like Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example, what are synchronicities, he would say that they're bunk. You know, they are, what do you call it, selection bias. Like personally, you just like cherry picking things, you're making connections that aren't actually there. And the thing is, yes, you can connect things that don't actually have a meaning, but some synchronicities are so improbable and so meaningful, and they can happen so frequently in clusters that really there's no way it can just be pure coincidence. So there has to be a meaning behind it. And if there is a meaning behind it, then that automatically disproves that the universe is just a meaningless machine that just runs on the laws of physics, and that's it, right? Yeah, so it's personal proof that a lot of this fringe stuff that we're talking about is true, or at the very least that reality is sort of like a collective dream, and that there are actual dream symbols in our waking environment that can come at us and give us messages.
Mhm. So we have a saying, and I think that has to do with synchronicities. And it goes something like that. When the pupil is ready, the teacher will appear. And the way I always understood that was the teacher can be anybody. It can be a child, it can be an elderly person, a woman, a man, or even a, yeah, let's say, official teacher, like a guru or whatever. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. Synchronicities in general, they are just improbabilities. They're things that don't fit the normal pattern of experience, like what you should be happening during the. I mean, I go through periods of time where I don't get any synchronicities. They can go for days, they can go for weeks sometimes,
Mm.
and during those same time periods, nothing interesting really is happening in my life either. Okay, but if something interesting is happening, like for example, if your life were a movie and someone were watching it, the boring parts they would be tuning out. They wouldn't even be paying attention to it, right? But if there's going to be like a drama, some sort of a fight, or maybe a great spiritual triumph, for example, or a growth period, or anything like that, then they would be tuning in. And also during that time period, that's also when synchronicities tend to happen if you're someone who gets synchronicities. So, in what you said, for example, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. That's an example of one type of synchronicity that I call an opportunity sync, because it's a synchronicity that actually has a practical meaning in terms of advancing your life story. Okay, and so what this means is that there are different types of synchronicities. See, if you look at a lot of discussions out there on synchronicity, a lot of the books, or just a general perception of them, people kind of tend to think of it as a mysterious, nebulous phenomenon that's just like, oh, this is weirdness that's happening. It's kind of cool, and some people think that they're messages. Some people think that they're warnings, like omens, for example, and others think that they're just the universe kind of winking at you in a magical way to remind you that you're more than just your physical body. And then I say, well, why can't it be all of these things? What if there are different types of synchronicities and they have different mechanisms behind them and they have different meanings? So, I've been tracking my syncs, I call them syncs, but I've been tracking my synchronicities since about 2001, 2002, where in college, when I was going through a really rapid spiritual and awakening growth phase, I was getting them, a couple times a day, like constantly. And there's the craziest synchronicities back then. So I started paying attention to them, started logging them quite a bit, and started correlating them with anything around them, like my emotional state, what I was thinking, what was happening within 48 hours, 72 hours. And so after tracking enough of them, patterns started to emerge of different types of synchronicities and what they correlated to. So that's why on YouTube I came up with this. I made this video called, it's about synchronicity, and I talk about the 7 different types and their possible meanings. And that one has quite a lot of views, I guess, because a lot of people have synchronicities and they're trying to figure out what they mean, right? So the video was good food for thought for these people to try to analyze their own experiences and see if they fit any of the patterns that I describe in the video. Um, yeah, so that's the important thing about things to remember is that number one, they are personal proof of a higher reality, and number two, that there are different types. Now, it's not critically important that you understand like exactly what each type is and try to categorize everything. That wasn't the point of my video. My point was simply to point out that they don't all have one meaning. So therefore, if you pay attention to your experiences, see if you can figure out some patterns in them. And if you can, then synchronicities can actually serve as precursors, as indicators of things that are coming up. So like right now in my life, for example, if I start getting a big cluster of synchronicities, I will pay attention to what happens within the next 24 to 48 hours. Because a lot of times they correlate to some sort of a bump in the road, whether it's a disagreement or argument or a fight with someone or, something negative in my case. But I've also had them in conjunction with, major periods of spiritual positive awakening too. Okay. So if I'm not going through a positive spiritual awakening and I'm starting to get a bunch of synchronicities, then in my case, yeah, I start paying more attention to what might be coming up in the next day or two.
How do you define that for yourself, that you're getting a bunch of synchronicities?
Well, it's based on like, okay, so synchronicities, the only way they can actually be an actual synchronicity is if there's some level of improbability to them. Okay. Because, for example, if someone says, "Oh, I see the number 5 all the time," okay, well, that's only one digit and it's everywhere. I could look around right now and I'm sure I could find it somewhere if I were to look for it. Okay, so if you increase that to 2 digits, 50, 55, for example, okay, now that's harder to find, but it still appears on the clock, once every hour. Okay, so maybe not. Once you start going to 3 digits and 4 digits, at that point, now you're talking about, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 chance of you actually seeing a number, if not greater than that. So if there's enough of an improbability behind it, then it just jumps out at you. Like you don't have to go looking for it. You can be driving and all of a sudden the exact car that kind of cuts you off and pulls in front of you has on its license plate a number or a message or a word that's weird in itself and also has a meaning for you. Okay. So I'll give you one example. One of the many things that I research, one of them is alchemy. Okay. And in alchemy, there's a substance that's a precursor to one of the things you need in order to get to the second and third stages. But some sources call it gur, Gur, gur. I think it's a German word. But yeah, anyway, gur. So anyway, one day I was at a park, and this dad walks by with this kid. And this is the same day I was like making some discoveries in alchemy, and he was going gur at his kid. Okay, so maybe not. That could be synchronicity, could be not. Okay, but I was thinking about it. Got me thinking. Well, that's kind of weird that he would say that. And then right afterwards, we went to a grocery store. And in the parking lot, I was thinking, well, a lot of times license plates are a good way that synchronicities can happen just because they're always around us and, they have variations. But I was thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to really pay attention to it. My eye just happened to catch a car right in front of us. And all it said on the license plate was, hey, Hey, like, hey, like pay attention. So I was thinking, okay, well, that's kind of weird. Like, who has a license plate that just says, hey? Maybe they're being comical, being kind of ironic, but it's weird that it would be in front of me, right? Right when I was thinking, okay, well, don't pay attention to it, something said, hey. So I thought, okay, well, if this has a meaning behind it, then maybe there'll be another one that has a synchronistic meaning. And then sure enough, just about 2 seconds ahead, there was another car that pulled in front of me, and it had on the license plate just the letter CuSO4, which is actually it's copper sulfate, which is a chemistry term for well, it's called green copperas, Copperas. And copperas is actually the same chemical. Well, the iron form of it is actually the same chemical substance as gur in alchemy. That's what gur actually is. It's related to that. So it's funny that within the span of about 45 minutes, I had gur, I had hey on the license plate telling me to pay attention, and then had CuSO4 with the chemical term for copperas on a license plate, and copperas is one of the key things in alchemy. Okay. And that all happened within 45 seconds or 45 minutes. So, those three things, those are improbable enough on their own. I mean, who has a chemical formula? I mean, I've never seen a chemical formula on a license plate before, let alone that one, which pertains to gur. And when I would not have seen it had it not been for the hey license plate. Okay. So that's an example of a level of improbability that I think not only is it improbable, but it has meaning for me personally. Now, if that happened to someone else, they would see CuSO4 and maybe they don't know chemistry, so they wouldn't even pay attention to it, right? But that's how synchronicities work. They don't mean much to someone else who sees them, but to you, they fit. And so in that sense, it's almost like a directed message. See, there's this thing called steganography. And what steganography is hiding hidden messages inside of pictures. Okay. And like in the digital realm, for example, you can have a website with a picture on it. It's just a picture of a I don't know, a news event, some war or some public figure. But if you were to download the file, and if someone has embedded a hidden message in it, you could use the right software and extract the hidden message. So maybe that's how spies communicate in the old days or something like that. But synchronicities, in a way, are a form of hyperdimensional steganography. in that it's something beyond 3D, something beyond linear time that is sending a hidden message through the three-dimensional picture that is before you, known as your environment, known as your daily life. Okay. And so in that sense, just as, one spy only wants to communicate with another spy and they do it through the picture in a very specific way that only the other spy can decode, likewise, synchronicities happen through your environment in a way that only you find meaning in it. Okay. Now, in some cases, symbols are universal enough that sure, they do have meaning to a lot of people. Like, for example, amongst Native Americans, there's certain tribes of them, there's an agreement that, this bird means this, or that sign means that. Okay, so there's a shared meaning amongst them. So one person gets it, okay, they find it meaningful. Or if they tell, their elder, like, hey, this is what I saw today, the elder would say, oh yeah, well, this means this. Okay. And the same thing with like dream symbols. I mean, that's why dream dictionaries even exist, is because there is sort of a shared lexicon of archetypal meanings between many people. And it's interesting how we all can have dreams with, I don't know, with our teeth falling out or being naked in public, or, you know what I mean, or being in a dirty bathroom. And they'll have universal meanings. You can look it up in a dream dictionary and pretty much everyone will agree, oh yeah, that is applicable to my life. So there is a shared, dictionary between all of us. And the same thing can sort of be said of synchronicities, for certain types of synchronicities, the ones that are actual, like, meaningful and symbolic. Sometimes, though, synchronicities can simply just be pure improbability. And the only thing that makes them meaningful is what they correlate with, okay? So you might be reading a sentence in a book or a phrase in a book, and just then someone walks by and says that exact phrase. And it's not a common phrase either. And if you were to look at the meaning of that phrase, maybe that meaning doesn't really have anything. Maybe it could be like, I saw that today. Like, I saw what today? Like that phrase, I saw that today. That phrase in itself might not really mean much, but that little improbability might correlate with, I don't know, getting into a car accident or having an argument, let's say, 18 hours from now. And you might notice that again and again and again, that every time you read something and someone else walks by or you hear it said at the same time, that it always correlates with the same type of event in your life coming up within a day or two. So at that point, it's not that the message itself has a symbolic meaning that you can look up in a dream dictionary. It's just that the timing of it correlates with something, and that's what makes it meaningful. So that's what I mean by different types of synchronicities having different origins and different meanings, is that, there are different mechanisms. So that's a completely different sync from seeing, for example, 1111 on a clock or license plate. So and those are some of the easiest ones to get because it's very convenient. If something wants to send you a positive message or just an indicator, I think it's easier for it to do so through numbers, through license plates, through clocks, through I don't know, the size of a file that you're downloading. It could be 11.11 megabytes, for example. Something like that. It's way easier to do that than something more arcane that, like a bigger message that has to spell out in symbolic ways and hope that you get it. So so with numbers, that's a pretty popular subject. So many people are into 1111 and seeing it on the clock, or other numbers too. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know. Do you get numbers ever?
Sometimes, but I have a slightly different take on that.
Mm-hmm.
When I researched this 1111, you will find that a lot of people are totally into, your guardian angels, the archangel, blah, blah. I'm not very fond of angels, I have to say that. So, and I'm not even convinced that they are totally positive forces. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And I heard somebody else explain that while most people think, oh, 1111, what a beautiful message, that 1111 in reality means the Greys have started their project.
In what way? How does it correlate with Grace?
I don't know. She didn't really, but she just, deconstructed all these ideas that these numbers are so positive and you should be happy all the time to see them. She said that 1111 especially means the Grace starting the project, and you are informed about this, and it is not necessarily a positive sign. I don't know what to make of it, but yeah, there are opposing ideas out there.
Well, exactly. Yeah, there's a big spectrum of views on what these numbers mean, right?
Mm.
But not only that, but people have a spectrum of experiences with these numbers, right?
Mm.
So, so I mean, okay. I mean, let's be realistic, right? 1111 is ultimately just a number. I mean, if you just look at the symbol, I mean, the numbers themselves, they're just numbers.
Mm.
And numbers don't really have meaning until you assign them a meaning, or until something else assigns them a meaning. If you see the number 65, right, what does it mean? Well, to some people it just means the speed limit on a road. That's where they see that number, and that's what it means to them. And to someone else it might mean nothing because they don't really have anything relating to 65, or maybe it's their phone number, right, so it pertains to them. But point being, so with 1111, so earlier when I said that synchronistic symbols have almost like a universal meaning that you can look up in a dream dictionary, that's generally true. But these meanings can also be customized to you, to your situation, to your own subconscious workings. And I mean that goes with dream symbols too. A certain dream symbol, you can look it up, and that's what it means to 90% of people. But to the 10%, it could have been customized to mean something else. Like for example, a black cat, to someone who hates black cats, it might mean some negative force in their life. Okay, but to me, we had a black cat, and she was really sweet and awesome. And this black cat was able to sense when there was paranormal phenomena around. So it's almost like a guard dog, but the cat version of it. So when I had dreamt of her in a dream, it pertained to something occult being around. So it's like my own internal subconscious symbol for like a tripwire alarm that there was something going on. And so therefore in the dream I was a little more cautious. Okay.
Mm.
So that's an example of a customized meaning to to be something personal. And the same thing can be said for numbers. Okay. I knew one guy a long time ago for whom the number 111, which to a lot of people would be, oh, that's an angel number. Well, to him, it was like 3 claw marks on a door. So something trying to get in, like, some negative force trying to bust into the door of his reality, metaphorically. And so for him, it had a negative meaning. Okay. Whereas for me, I correlated it with things being in the flow. So when I am actually in a good mood and things are in the flow and going well, okay, then all of a sudden, 1111s just start coming at me amongst other numbers. But here's the thing, even if that were to be the case for a lot of people, that does not prevent, certain really out there New Agers, or even people who are under the influence of grays and demonic beings, from taking that phenomenon and hijacking it and making money off of it, commercializing it, distorting the meaning of it, or just making up meanings. Like maybe they just get a general sense. Oh, well, I get around positive times in my life. Well, the grays have helped me; they're positive. So that's like kind of the opposite of what you said. I
Yeah.
mean, because what you're talking about is almost like, oh shoot, this is a sign that the grays are starting the program. Well, for some people who actually love the grays, they would think that that's a good thing, right? So when they start associating 1111 with the grays in their lives, that's how they would interpret it. That you know what I mean? So for each person, there's a color that their own personal subconscious situation uh, imprints upon the meaning of a general, more universal archetype, and you just have to figure out for yourself what it means. But there's no doubt about it, though, that there is a lot of the 11 and 11 phenomenon. I'm talking about in print on websites and blogs, where it's being spun in a kind of probably in a direction that's not applicable or true for the most part for even most people, let alone maybe even the people that are presenting these ideas. Maybe they themselves are fooled, or maybe they're giving into wishful thinking or fantasy, and they're projecting that really subjective distortion upon what should be a more generic idea of, oh, you're just in the flow. Like, oh, I'm just in the flow because the grays are in my life, making things better. So they add that little twist to it. And so just because you read a book saying that these are angel numbers or whatever, it doesn't mean it has to be exactly that in your life, right? So you just have to document your synchronicities and just kind of keep track of when they happen, and then figure out the pattern without getting too crazy into speculation land about what the source is. Like, 1112 means Archangel Michael is smiling on me, or whatever you believe in. I mean, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
Archangel Michael. And what if it's just your higher self? What if it's just positivity in general? Why add that element of twist to it if it's possibly not true? So that's why on my website I talk about positive forces, I talk about negative forces, and I get into some of the types, like grays, mantis, Nordics, and stuff like that. But I don't go into crazy land with like, oh yeah, that's the Syrian Council of the seventh galaxy or something like that. Like, how would I know that? How would anyone know that? You know, I mean, if it's channeled, okay, well, maybe it's true because there's no way to verify it. But then again, it could just as well be made up. So that's why I try to keep things kind of generic, because if you keep things generic, then you really don't have a chance of being false about it. You know, if I say aliens, okay, that's true. If I say aliens from this particular star system, that's possibly false. So that's why I just say aliens, because that's true. And the more falseness or falsehood and illusion that you incorporate into your belief system and into your speech and everything like that, it seems like on an occult level, it opens up certain vulnerabilities. You know, like I noticed that the more I emotionally invest myself in something that's illusion, kind of like a false track, the more my life kind of goes off the rails, and I start losing protection for some reason. And I think it's only because when you lose protection like that, you start it's like being on a highway. Well, in America, on the sides of highways, they have these rumble strips. So when your car goes over them, it makes a noise. So that's how you know that you're going off track. So sometimes punishment in life, difficult experiences, sometimes they're growth experiences. Sometimes they are like these rumble strips that warn you that you're kind of going off path. So as I said, like if I invest myself too much in illusory belief systems, then I start getting that the rumble strip effect, which basically means that I get more accidents, more illnesses, more injuries, more things going wrong, and then I have to kind of take a step back and look at myself like, okay, well, what am I doing that might be allowing this or attracting this? And I generally find like, oh yeah, I've been investing myself too much in that belief system or whatever. And then if I really look at it, I realize, okay, probably shouldn't be doing that. I mean, it's got a lot of problems with it. Why am I even believing in that kind of stuff? So the same thing with synchronicities. If you assign a meaning to them that's like way off base, then a lot of weird things can start happening in life where, I don't know, you can come under negative influences pretty quickly if you go too deep down that rabbit hole. Like I said, if you believe that all numbers come from this particular new age figure, then pretty soon that new age figure might start appearing in your dreams, and now you've got this parasitic entity you know, stalking you, trying to feed on your energy. And if it succeeds, who knows? Maybe you yourself will become an author and write a book on how 1111 means. Archangel Gabriel is and his cohort of the seventh heaven is gonna save you from your troubles.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If it's true, I'm sorry, angels. I don't want to piss you off, but I'm just speaking from my experience.
Oh, I probably pissed them off pretty much. I told everybody to stay away from me.
That's funny. Yeah. Now, I mean, personally, I do believe that there are actual positive type beings that we could call angels, but there's a lot of imposters too that take that form,
Mhm.
and that's a difficulty. So if you don't make that distinction, right, then you can either throw them all out, including possibly the positive ones,
Yeah.
or if you don't make that distinction, you could accept them all, including the imposters. So that's why the truth is always somewhere in the middle, where you have to apply a little bit of discernment and try to figure out, okay, well, what's real and what isn't. I
Mm.
mean, and if you take the shortcut, a lot of people they prefer taking the easy way out, which is binary thinking, right? Which is black versus white, sort of shades of gray. Um, but anyway, yeah, if you take the shortcuts, you tend to fall into traps more easily. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Yeah. I was just thinking if that is an effective way of communicating, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of synchronicities
Mhm.
just go by unnoticed by us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you this much. So I know a guy who was very clairvoyant, and like very clairvoyant. Like he has an actual very strong connection to his higher mind,
Mm.
and because of that, he doesn't get synchronicities. He doesn't get them, and the reason is because he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to get them because he already has a connection internally with that other higher part of our being. So this kind of goes back to what Jung said about synchronicities. He basically implied that they were an external manifestation of internal pressure from the subconscious trying to communicate something. So the subconscious, because there was some sort of a psychic blockage or emotional blockage, it couldn't get it directly through you internally, through your own understanding. So it has to go through the environment in order to send it at you like that. So of course, if you don't have that blockage internally and you can get that meaning directly, then you wouldn't necessarily need synchronicities. Okay. So in my case, I can sense people's intentions and energies generally, like if they're good people or not, but I can't read minds. I don't really have a very strong psychic connection with, my, I don't know if you want to call them guides, but I'm basically the higher self. Okay. I don't really have a very, very super strong inner direct conscious connection with it. So therefore I get synchronicities, because for me, that's a very effective way to get a message at me. But as you said, I'm sure many happen that we don't notice. But then again, whatever is sending it, it probably knows that we wouldn't notice it. So maybe it doesn't even, so then maybe it doesn't even try. So maybe it knows that one moment where we happen to be glancing in a certain direction or doing this, maybe it knows it ahead of time, and it can actually arrange it to happen exactly at that time. Because if it's that smart and that powerful and beyond linear time, then I'm sure it can find all the spots on the timeline where you're kind of open to receiving it. And worst case, if it can't do it through our environment, it'll probably send it to our dreams, which is interesting that it works through both ways, because it kind of implies that waking reality is sort of like a dream, and I think we sort of discussed this last time about how waking reality is essentially a collective dream. Is just a lot more solid because there's billions and trillions of beings that are plugged into it, all of their subconsciouses kind of holding it in place. Whereas our own nightly dreams, it's just our own subconscious for the most part. I think someone in the comments on one of the videos said, okay, well, that's not true, because we have like other entities plugging into our dreams. Yes, so those are the exception more so than the rule, though. Those are like add-ons to the basic premise that mainly it's our subconscious that's running our dreams. But yes, there are other beings that can plug into our dreams, both good and more bad, depending on the situation.
She missed my synchronicity for the third time. Now I'm going to get out the hammer.
Yeah, that can happen. So the thing with synchronicities is that if you do, so if you get one, let's say it's a warning synchronicity, like a warning sign. So you get one of those, and it's a serious situation, and you see it, but so you see it. So it did its job. It got the message to you. So you saw it, but then you rationalize it away. Like, no, it doesn't mean anything. Okay, you will probably get another warning sync at some point, in the near future. And if you ignore that one, the occult law is the law of threes, which is that it's not a law; it's more like a tendency, which is that things tend to come in threes. So you get three warnings, you get three chances, and if by the third one you still ignore it, then after that, everything is on. The ball's in your court. It's up to you, and whatever happens, you kind of deserved it for ignoring the signs 3 times in a row. And then that might happen, for example, let's say you're a girl or a guy, you're about to date someone, and maybe you're attracted by their bad girl or bad guy vibe. So some people are really into that. And let's say you get some major warning synchronicities, some major warning signs. It can be in the form of someone telling you outright, like, hey, I'm just my honest opinion. I know this person. It's trouble. Don't do it. Okay, that's not really synchronicity. That's just like a direct message, right? That's common sense. Yeah, but you might start getting other synchronicities too. And I don't want to get into them too much because it's unique to each person, right? So if I were to say all of a sudden, I don't know, you get a bunch of ants or rats or some sort of a weird, what do you call it, vermin infestation. Not everyone who has that as a synchronistic meaning pertaining to their loved one in life. I don't want people to get paranoid for no reason, right? So that's why I'm not getting into all these signs necessarily, because it's going to be unique to your situation. Okay, so I don't want to be an authority saying that this particular symbol means this, so therefore your loved one is
and it means
a psychopath or something.
This and for everybody, yeah.
Yeah. And then conversely, on the other end of the scale, some people, they get very paranoid about things, and they read into every little thing. Like right now, I could look at your video and I could say, oh, there's like, I don't know, 8-10 stripes on your sweater, and like 10 for me is a synchronistic number, meaning, oh, that's negative, so therefore I don't trust you. Yes, no, it doesn't work like that. An actual warning sign is going to kind of hit you in the face. And it's only because you're rationalizing it away on purpose. And in that moment when you're rationalizing it away, you can actually feel that little voice within saying like, no, this is trouble. But you're like, oh, no, I don't want to listen to that. I want to be in the dream. I want to be in the hypnotic state. I want to be focused in this, this what do you call it, reverie of the mind, and emotion. And you can tell when you're lying to yourself. If you're really honest, you can tell when you're suppressing your true intuition. So when you do that in conjunction with a warning sign that's actually hitting you in the face, then I'm talking. That's what I'm talking about. You know, 3 of those in a row, and then you're on your own because you had your chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, you don't need to go nitpicking and microanalyzing every little thing, because if you do that, you can start making connections that aren't actually there.
Yeah. I think if you're a little bit aware and you are paying attention, you will notice a warning sign.
Yeah, yeah. You just have to be open, and then when it happens, you just have to think about it a little bit. Like, you know, is this me being subjective? Am I reading into things, or is this itself improbable enough and weird enough that it could mean something? And then ultimately, these synchronicities, they're only suggestions, right? They're not commands about what you should do or what you should believe in. And the reason I say that is because while some synchronicities are sent by your subconscious, or let's say by your higher self or something, to inform you of something or give you a sign, um, there is a phenomenon of artificial synchronicities, which are caused on purpose by actual negative entities in order to lead you astray. Now, in my YouTube video on synchronicities, I do talk about that in one point. And funny enough, so many people, well, some people in the comments, you know, so the video's got like, I don't know, like 350,000 views. So it has a lot of views on it, which means a lot of people get it in their suggested videos, which means a lot of people are accessing it who normally would have nothing to do with my material or my site. Okay, they're just into the new age stuff or positive stuff. So they're watching the video and like everything's great. And they get to that part where I talk about negative entities and artificial synchronicities. And they're like, I hate this video. It's so negative, you know, like, you know, thumbs down. And hey, well, what can I say? You know, I I do it as a public service to inform those who are susceptible to that particular form of trap. You know, like, what am I going to do? Like, leave that part out just because a couple of people find it negative? No, I'm going to say it. So I do talk about artificial synchronicities and, you know, some ways to watch out for them. I've experienced quite a number of them myself. I mean, back in 2001, when I first started researching the whole matrix, fake reality, artificial synchronicity idea, funny enough, it was weird because I had a couple different websites at the time, and one of the websites had nothing to do with any of this fringe stuff. It was just its own thing. Well, someone emailed me through the email on that website, saying like, I don't know how I got on your site, but, you know, I wanted to talk to you about, I don't know, like matrix, fake reality, and artificial synchronicities. And that site had nothing to do with that. There's no way that they could have known, right? So that in itself was a weird thing. And at the time, I didn't know too much about how all of this worked. So this person, they started we started communicating, and they ended up being a total matrix vector of disinformation, which is, yeah, which was to mirror my mindset at the time, you know, the things I believed in, to an uncanny weird degree, but add upon that a whole bunch of disinformation. Like, not only is reality fake, but, you know, there's this hyperdimensional hurricane that sweeps through, and it swept through in 1993, and you know, everyone therefore now is pretending to be human, but except for you and me and a couple other people, something like that. And if I had believed that, okay, that's a short skip away from paranoid schizophrenia.
And the
Right?
others are what?
Well, so the rest of us are the ones that were not affected by this hyperdimensional hurricane. So therefore, we were not converted into these matrix bots, you know. But everyone else around you is an agent of them, and they have an implant in their head or something like that, and they're communicating with each other telepathically and with the matrix, and, you know, they're pretending, you know, the whole like what do you call it? You know, the TI people, the targeted individual people, they have this thing called street theater. They believe that there's people in the streets that purposely, you know, cross paths and jingle their keys and cough at certain times, and then do weird things to freak them out as a psychological torture tactic. And okay, maybe that happens in some cases, but I think 95% of cases, that's just normal people going about their lives. And these people are reading into things due to a, you know, subconscious schizophrenia-like complex, you know, that they're having. But the point being that artificial synchronicities, they're weird things that try to get you to believe that it's a sign from the universe, or it's meant to be somehow, even though it isn't, you know? So the one example I gave in my video is, for example, like, what if you're on the street and someone hands you a book, a free book? You know, it's like they're giving out free books, little pocket books. And it's a book by a certain guru. Let's say this guru's name is John of God. I wonder who that could be, right? So so you take this book home, and then someone emails you, someone you haven't heard from in 5 years, 10 years, and they email you and saying, yeah, it's great. I've been into this awesome guy, watching his videos. His name is John of God. He's really great. And I think I might go visit him. And maybe you want to come with me? And then that night, let's say you go to bed and you find, I don't know, like a flower petal on the floor or on your pillow. And this flower petal, interestingly enough, is exactly the same flower that's on the book cover that John of God is holding, or it has has around his neck as a little flower thing. And so you start wondering to yourself, well, gee, that's kind of weird. It's definitely a sign, right? But you're not questioning a sign from what? A sign from what? Well, you think it's a sign, and if you're not careful, you're going to take that sign, you're going to go down to wherever he was it South America somewhere, and you're going to join his organization, and then before you know it, you're in a cult. You're in a cult that's ultimately being run by demonic beings that are working through this instrument, this human vessel that portrays itself as saintly and angelic, when in real life, he's running freaking baby farms, and killing women he abducted off the streets. So that's an example of an artificial synchronicity. It's a form of bait. Okay, so you can imagine a fisherman of a negative orientation in fourth density or some higher dimension, casting a fishing line into 3D in the form of a very, very bold, very crude, very in your face synchronicity that doesn't leave much to free will. It's like a sales tactic. It tries to advertise you to go down a certain path, and not only that, but it's very, very strongly trying to influence your beliefs and your actions. So it's a form of behavioral manipulation. Okay, which isn't the case for a lot of the positive synchronicities, for the most part. I mean, if you get like, for example, a precursor synchronicity, which foreshadows a trouble coming up in your life, it's only going to inform you, like, hey, heads up, be careful. I mean, there's nothing bad about that. It's not telling you something very specific about something necessarily. It's just telling you to be careful. That's way different from 3 synchronicities in a row trying to get you linked up with John of God, for example, or it could be Scientology, it could be whatever. It could be this new age guru, that cult leader, or that disinformation source. I've also had it with alien material too. Trying to get me linked up with certain false disinformation, alien type things, and which doesn't really work for me. So I don't really get that anymore. But I'm sure some people, especially with the Greys, I could try to convince them to invite Greys into their life. Maybe they get a book called Calling on Extraterrestrials, or How to Invite ETs into Your Life, and they do the steps in there, and they invite Greys into their life, and that's it. Now they're under the influence of a shady alien faction that they shouldn't have any business with, if they were being wise about it.
And now my life is falling apart.
Yeah. Do I join the military, or do I call in the Greys? Yeah, that's a sad fact for a lot of Americans, unfortunately. But yeah. I mean, there's always positive forces, that the genuine ones. I mean, if you keep it generic, if you just say positive forces, if you just say divine forces, you're not like I said, you're not targeting specific, possibly fantasy entities. And if you genuinely resonate with that and open yourself to that possibility, and you're earnest about it, you might get help from that. And you're not going to fall into the same Faustian deal with the devil that you would if you were to call on the Greys, for example, or some sort of made up deity.
Yeah, John of God has been arrested. Yeah. But I didn't follow that story. I don't know if he's still.
Well, yeah. The whole investigation is still going on, and the sad thing is that he's only one of many. There's so many others out there that are like that, and people that are falling for it. So, yeah, I mean, I guess reality is kind of like a game of pool, where there's all these pockets everywhere, and you're kind of being knocked around and as a ball on the pool table until eventually someone gets knocked into a pocket, and then they're gone, and then someone else gets knocked into a pocket and they're gone. So. It's all about being wise about your decisions and thinking about what you're going to do before you actually do it, so that you don't fall for a lot of these deceptions.
You talked a little bit about relationships, and I find it amusing. A lot of people, especially women, but I also see that in men, a lot of people end up with not a partner, a patient, a project. And so when they ask me, what do you think? She's great. And then usually, at that point, I don't say anything. I just usually say, interesting. But anybody that knows me a little bit better knows that when I say, interesting, there
Hmm.
is a whole different story behind that.
Yeah.
But funny enough, people want to hear what they want to hear. So they just think in that moment, although they know better, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Got some examples in my own life, relatives and such I'm sure we know lots of people, if not ourselves, we know others who run into trouble like that. And I mean, okay, so if it's two people who are, they're both souled, that they both incarnated with real spirits,
Mm,
but they just have emotional issues, immaturities, maybe past life holdovers with each other, things like that. Okay, they're gonna have issues. They're not gonna be perfect, and they're gonna have a lot of friction, and
mm,
over time they help each other iron out each other's wrinkles. Okay, so that's a healthy thing.
mm,
A perfect relationship doesn't have to be perfect in the sense of zero friction ever. Okay,
mm,
right? Because like I said, we've got personality incompatibility. Sometimes we have, like I said, past life holdovers where we're here to actually teach each other lessons through the trials of a relationship. But the thing about that is a person will grow over time. They will change over time. Even
mm,
if there's suffering involved, they will change, and they will both grow towards a certain level of equilibrium over time where then things start settling out. Some people, well, people in quotes, some people do not change.
mm,
They might adapt in the sense of becoming better at getting away with things, with hiding what they actually are, right? But they
mm,
don't actually change or improve or grow on any discernible spiritual, personal, emotional level. And so if you know someone like that and you've tried over and over again and they never improve, they never change, they just come up with excuses. They
mm,
just try to massage you psychologically to go back asleep and stay with me and stay in the same cycle of abuse and dysfunction. Well, then you have to ask yourself, what is the point of staying in a relationship like that?
mm,
Because your own life, your own clock is ticking away. You're not going to gain back those days, and life is too short to be wasting years on someone who is basically eating your soul,
mm,
eating your time. And what if you had taken that same time and invested it in someone else who can change, who or maybe doesn't need to change much, but who just has a more positive effect on you, and vice versa. you know so I think some people get stuck in things, right? Because that's all they know, that's all they're comfortable with, and the discomfort of change is more scary than the discomfort of being in something that's familiar. So I think that's the reason why a lot of people stay in dysfunctional situations, whether it's a job or a family situation, or relationships, partners, things like that, is because it's more scary to try to leave and try to figure out, well, what am I going to do without him or her? I'm going to be on my own. I'll have to find someone else. All that kind of stuff. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of uncertainty. And some people prefer, like, okay, well, I'm nah, fine. I'm just going to stay where I am. But it's not like they actually think that, right? It's a subconscious feeling that they have,
mm,
because a lot of
mm,
times they're not even analyzing their situation. Um, but it's just one of those challenges in life. So in that case, for example, if the other person theoretically, let's say, isn't even actually a real person, but it's just like a placeholder background character, even in that case, sometimes those kinds of people are in your life because you elected to allow that in order to teach yourself the lessons of standing up for yourself, of you know what do you call it, like emotional spiritual endurance under great distress, for example. But if that's the case, at some point it's got to stop. At some point, okay, lesson is over, you're done, on to the next thing. You can't keep that up for 10, 20, 30, 40 years,
no.
because then life is over, and then shoot, you didn't get anything done. Guess what? You're gonna elect to come back, and you're gonna elect to do it again. And if you don't want to do it again, you better take care of it now instead of waiting until decades or even a lifetime from now.
Wading into oblivion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not saying it's easy. It's actually it's some of the hardest things we can do in life. Uh, but I think as long as you're honest with yourself, and as long as you feel like you can own up to what you're doing, like, okay, like like some people say, it was a very difficult time period, but if I could do it all over again, I would, just because it led to the certain level of growth. So if you can say that about your life right now, if you can say that about your life, then cool. It's great. You're just keep on going. But if you're at a point where like, no, this is killing my soul, I'm not progressing anymore, this is over with, I just can't take it anymore, then it's better to do it sooner than later, to get out of that situation. Because the sooner you get out of it, the more you'll appreciate yourself for getting out of it. You don't want to die with too many regrets.
Yeah. And at one point, it can feel as if you're trying to dust in the desert. At one point, you just, that it will never be finished. Never. No way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to add real quickly to that earlier I talked about people who read too much into things, and they go into more of a paranoid schizophrenic direction. That's especially true with relationships, because, and the reason I say this, and that's why this whole situation isn't as easy as you would think. And it's because, on the one hand, sure, you have a situation where you're in a relationship and there are some major red flags, things that you should be aware of, but you can feel deep down that you're pushing them out of the way and you're trying to ignore them. Okay, so that's one situation. The other side of the coin, though, is where the other person is a sold person, you're sold, everything's good, but either you are being too paranoid, or more likely, if negative forces are actually trying to split up two good people, they will actually insert false thoughts into each person's head, okay, to create conflict, to seed a certain false perception of the other person. And usually when that happens, it's a subtle, it's a strong, hasty pressure in the back of your mind telling you like, no, think of this person this way, think of this person this way, think of this person this way. It's a push, right? It's a push, like say this to her, and then in her mind, she's thinking like, oh, he's probably thinking this about me, and if he says this, then that confirms it. Of course, he's being influenced to say that exact thing, and then that confirms for her that yes, he is thinking that thing. So it's like two people kind of being played against each other. And the only way to get around that is to have honesty and to, at some point, be frank with each other about some of these feelings that you're having. So as long as you bring things out into the open and you communicate it early on, that can snip a lot of these issues that might start developing. Because when you have these false thoughts being seeded, it can build up over months, even sometimes years, and it just becomes a case of like mutual emotional projection where you're projecting your own shadow and false beliefs upon each other, and that's when it becomes extremely toxic. But if you're frank with it and both people are sold and they're capable of self-examination and honesty and such, then the relationship can be saved, because then they can work it out. Okay. But this whole thing about super micro analyzing another person and reading into every little thing, like, are they a matrix agent? Are they not? She ate a piece of lettuce instead of the cherry. Well, what does cherry mean in a dream dictionary? I don't know. Don't read into things like that. It's not that's crazy land. That's crazy land. It's more about the major red flags, like actual symptoms of sociopathic or psychopathic or narcissistic traits, that if you were to take her to a clinic, they would actually diagnose her as those things. If you're ignoring those level of signs, then you've got issues with discernment, because some red flags are so huge that there's no reason why you should be ignoring them. But if you do and you get burned from it, okay, you'll learn. And then if you finally move on from that relationship, you'll probably not repeat that pattern again, just because you've learned from it. But some people do repeat patterns over and over again, just because their emotional wounds and false beliefs are so deeply entrenched, from childhood traumas and abandonment issues, things like that they keep attracting abusers. But those kinds of people, either one day they wake up to it and they start analyzing themselves and they start getting themselves out of it, or it takes many, many, many decades of pain and suffering before they finally get molded into a wiser, more aware person. But as you said, sure, some people, they don't listen. And they don't listen because when you talk to them, you're talking words and logic at them, you're being reasonable. But they are operating at the level of emotion, of, deep subconscious limiting beliefs, and ego needs to, I don't know, have something familiar, have like a familiar father figure who is abusive, just like your father, because that's what it's such a common thing. I mean, it's like millions of people like that out there. Yeah, so people like that, sometimes they just have to go through the hard thing, and that's hard for us too, watching other people go through their difficult lessons, because we love them, we like them, they're friends or family or whatever, and we can't always control other people because they have their own free will and they have their own learning lessons. So sometimes you just have to stand on the sidelines and let them go through a difficult experience. And for me, that's one of the hardest. It's one of the hardest things in life is watching other people suffer and not being able to do anything about it. You can offer them your support, but if they don't want it, then so be it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that we have cosmic appointments with certain people?
Yeah, I mean cosmic appointments. Well, that's a funny term, right? Because that implies two things: cosmic in a metaphysical sense, and cosmic in an alien sense, and those are two quite different things. So in a metaphysical sense, I mean, sure, there are. I mean, I do believe a lot of the afterlife research, and even kids who remember their past lives and stuff. A lot of that research talking about how the people that mean the most to us in our lives, a lot of times we've crossed paths with them before in previous lives. However you want to define reincarnation, we have a connection that goes beyond just this life, beyond this 3D reality. And for that reason, if a path is crossed before, then it'll likely, whether it's just plain attraction, like natural attraction between two resonant souls, or whether it's an actual prearranged, incarnational plan. Either way, people can be brought together in improbable circumstances to fulfill a greater destiny type purpose, whether it's for personal growth or whether it's for a greater mission. Like it doesn't have to be a guy and a girl. I mean, it doesn't have to be love relationships. It can be friendships too. It can be business partnerships, right? It can be, heck, it can be your landlord who helps you out in a time of need. Maybe in another life, you're a landlord and you help them out. I don't know. I mean, who knows how it works? It varies from case to case. But sure, people can be brought together based on a higher plan. But then, like I said, the flip side of that is cosmic appointments in the sense of alien manipulation, which gets into things that, like Eve Lorgan and James Bartley and all of them talk about, the whole love bite situation where people are brought together artificially. And the thing about that is they're brought together artificially, and because they don't have necessarily a prearranged karmic incarnational connection, they have to be artificially manipulated to feeling intense feelings for each other in an artificial way. And aliens can do that through mind programming. And I think there was one example in Eve Lorgan's book about one person's energy field being sampled, like a chunk of it being taken out and put into the chest of another abductee. So so they think there's an emotional connection when really it's just an artificial crossing or entanglement of energy fields. And that's something that's done by aliens during an abduction. And the thing is that aliens, just as much as they can artificially turn it on, they can just as well turn it off, right? And turn it off in only one person. So the other person is still, chemically, etherically obsessed with that person, but the other person is totally shut off. And that creates an intense level of, anguish and suffering and emotional. And I guess aliens either feed off that or do it as a form of spiritual warfare or, just experimentation. It's just hard to say. I think it depends on what the project is. But the point being that some relationships are brought together. And actually, Eve Lorgan has another really, really good book. It's called The Dark Side of Cupid. And it's all about occult manipulation of relationships. And there are so many examples in that book of people who seem to be instruments of whether it's alien or occult or demonic or some sort of weird force. And yeah, based on the number of emails I've gotten over the years, people I've chatted with, the percentage of relationships that are of that type, of someone coming in who seems to be an instrument of something very non-human almost, it's scary how high it is. I mean, you would think, oh, it's only a 1%. No, it's more like 25% of the people who email me, and these are people who are already fringe people. I mean, they're all, for the most part, spirited and souled. I mean, that's why they're into these subjects and that's why they're attracted to my site. So they're already a certain demographic who would have that sort of thing happen to them. But these types, when they get into relationships, it's a lot of the times it's a case where there's something very strange going on with it. It's arranged in some way, or the person has a lot of really weird influences piloting them, it seems. And so The Dark Side of Cupid, that's a really good book to look into for anyone who is interested in the subject or thinks they might have it going on in their life. They can go through that book and they can see other people's cases and see how much of those characteristics of those cases match up to their own situation. So cosmic appointments, it can be good, it can be bad sometimes. But even if it is bad, it's only bad in the sense that it's causing a lot of pain and suffering. But the fact that it is in your life shows that there is some sort of a weakness or some sort of a lesson that needs to be learned. some part of you that
Mm.
needs to strengthen up. And so in that sense, it can be good so long as you pay attention to it and think about it and kind of develop yourself in regards to it so that you overcome it. And, if you break up with a person, then great. Then hopefully next time you will have grown in such a way that you won't attract at all, such a person. And even if negative entities try to send such a person to you again, you would then recognize the signs and you'd be a stronger person. So you won't fall for those kinds of manipulations and abuse and so on. And therefore you won't have to deal with it anymore. And funny enough, actually, in those cases, I noticed once a person grows to the level where they overcome these kinds of abusive relationships or weird relationships, at that point, not only do they no longer attract those kinds of people, but now they actually attract what often tends to be the actual true person they're supposed to be with in life, according to the
Mm.
positive type of cosmic appointment. And so I think in that case, what it is a person comes into life, they have a certain set of lessons that they need to learn, certain weaknesses they need to overcome. And to overcome those, a lot of times they will go through relationships that are very dysfunctional, very difficult,
Mm.
and it trains them to become strong enough so that by the time they actually connect with the true person they're supposed to be with, who probably has also gone through the same sequence, they will both be mature enough to now be with each other in a more harmonious and mature way, and therefore they
Mm.
can just kind of polish off the sculpture that they've built of their soul over that life, through all the different kinds of chiseling that they've endured through past dysfunctional relationships. So in other words, many difficult relationships, once you go through them, eventually then you do get to the one person who is truly good for you. And it's a completely different thing. It's very low drama, very strong compatibility, a lot of parallels between you and the other person that are very good. But sometimes to get to that point, some people have to go through a series of difficulties.
Mm. In that process of growing and getting stronger,
Mhm.
do you think it's possible that sometimes there will be thrown one last, let's say, one last test at you? We we showcase it to you in another person for one more time, and we
Mhm.
will see if you are clever enough to detect the early signs.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes not just for relationships, but for anything that the whole matrix control system does.
Mm.
So much of what the matrix does, and I'm talking, for example, about well, this other thing I call the runaway mind reality feedback loop. And what that means is a person, let's say they see a shadow figure in the corner, okay, and they get
Mm.
freaked out by it. And over the next couple days, they start thinking about it more and more, and they start getting scared. Like now they think that there's something coming after them, and their fear manipulates reality itself into attracting more of those experiences that induce fear. Okay, so it's like a feedback loop. It's like negative form of reality creation. They just create more and more horrors, and these negative entities ride that by basically becoming stronger in that person's reality. And now it's not just a shadow figure in the corner. Now it's like they're surrounding my bed. Now they're poking me. I can't sleep. I feel like I'm being tortured. Now all of a sudden now they're speaking in my head and they're manipulating my dreams. So over the period of weeks, months, years, a person can be ground down to a very, I mean, like I said, paranoid schizophrenia in the true sense of the word, like being hospitalized for that or becoming homeless because they can't even function anymore. Um, Something like that. If they get a hold of themselves and they cut that feedback loop by shifting their mindset towards more positive things, getting away from fear and like feeling more empowered, protected, secured, things like that, they can make, I would say, 90 to 95% of the negative phenomena disappear from their lives. And it only takes weeks, if not a couple months, for that to happen. Once they change subconsciously and start feeling more positive, more empowered, everything's safer, then these phenomena start to evaporate from their lives. But it's not 100%. And the reason it's not 100% is because even though you've changed yourself internally, all you've done is cut off your participation in that entire process. But these entities are still real, they still exist, and they're still out there, and they still might have their eye on you. It's just that now you've got such a spiritual light and such a spiritual shield that they can't get at you to the degree that they did before, right? But the fact that they exist and that they have free will means that there is still like a 5% probability or chance that they would try something. And the way that this can manifest is that for 95% of your life, things are great, but there's that 5% of time where they might throw a little bait in your direction because that's all they're allowed. So you might occasionally still get tested by it. A couple years down the line, you might again see a shadow figure in a corner. And it is like a test. It's like, did you truly evolve, or are you going to fall for exactly the same cycle you did last time? Okay, so that's an example not involving relationships, where it's the same principle, where even after you master a lesson, you might still get tested periodically. Okay, but it's just a test. It's just a test. It's not a runaway experience that's going to last months of the same nightmare you went through last time. And the same thing goes for relationships too, where you might have mastered a lesson, but occasionally you will still get tested, and just remain calm and remember what you learned last time, and just be uh be competent about it, and just kind of go past it and deal with it in a mature and wise way, and that's it. You don't have to repeat the patterns from last time. You can just go on with your life after you kind of show that you know your stuff.
Mm. Going back to the cosmic appointments in the metaphysical sense, is it possible that either one party or maybe even both do not recognize what that is about? And let's say, okay, initial contact has been made, but they don't really get it
Mhm.
for whatever reason, and then the entire thing derails or
Mm.
fizzles out.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. So I mean, it's interesting because life is a mixture of, well, it's a mixture of different things. It's a mixture of actual fate, destiny, like what you're talking about here. It's a mixture of that. It's also a mixture of free will, and also a mixture of that and causality. Causality just means, physical force, random chance, things like that. So you have all three things going on, and that means not everything is guaranteed. Even if you're destined to be with someone, uh, there can still be deviations from that. There can be maybe a person, maybe two people are supposed to be together, and there's a negative entity that decides they shouldn't be together, because if they are, then they're going to protect each other from harm, and they're going to be stronger together. So let's try to split them up. So if there's any sort of a negative thought projection being put into those people's heads in order to make them become suspicious of each other, if one of those people succumbs to that, they can derail it on their own, out of their own free will. So they're tempted into breaking up what's ultimately a good thing. And it's not like positive forces are going to say, oh, well, this is your destiny, so we're going to make it so that you never think that. Like, they don't control your thoughts like that, because then they don't violate your free will like that. So the fact that we have some level of free will means that we're capable of derailing what is actually a positive thing.
Mm.
And to that's why it's so important to be honest with yourself, and be aware of your situation and what's going on internally, and to question your thoughts sometimes, to differentiate between an artificial external pressure, which feels very hasty and kind of crude, almost like a salesman trying to make a sale, like, come on, do it now, versus something that's more like a deep, calm, um, very strong, very knowing, kind of like consonant sense of something, which is more your actual true intuition, you know? So that's why spiritual development and self-training and becoming wiser and more aware and stronger, these are things that'll help your life in every way, whether it's relating to your jobs, to your relationships, to just your own truth-seeking process, or your dealings with aliens or demons, if you have that in your life, for example.
Mm.
um, they're no matter what it is, it all comes back down to inner spiritual development, and basically exercising your capacity as a spiritual consciousness. And what does spiritual consciousness have? What does consciousness have? It has the ability for self-awareness, for self-examination, for self-correction, for empathy, creativity, compassion, heart, love, all these things, and discernment. So all those qualities, the more you exercise them in your life, the more conscious you become, and the less you have to depend upon life giving you painful lessons in order to mold you into a higher state. The more you take control of your own evolution process by working on yourself, the less you have to depend on life giving you painful lessons to do that for you. So that's why I say there's two ways of evolving in life: the easy way and the hard way. And the hard way is to not be conscious and to just let life kind of hammer you into shape, which is very, very painful and takes a long time. And the easy way, which is hard only in the sense that you have to apply your own effort to actually sit and think about your life, and and kind of introspect, and do self work, self development, and make yourself become a better person, and just more aware, and more in control of your subconscious issues that might otherwise be yanking you around in unpredictable directions.
Yeah. And that way, your inner work can affect the outside world.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, life in itself is ultimately a form of inner work. It's just that it takes place outside of you through all the mess that you get into, that kind of shapes you, like I said, from the outside. But you can also do inner work inwardly through your own effort, just through, like I said, self-examination, like being aware of yourself, being aware of what's going on inside of you, and just thinking about things, contemplating, and just growing wise from your experiences, extracting the lessons from everything that you're going through. Because some people, it's interesting. Like some people, they don't really spend much time inside their own heads, right? They're only focused on what's happening externally, and they don't ever really do much introspection or contemplation, or it's really contemplating life and kind of coming to certain realizations about it. And so if you don't do that, then like I said, it takes a lot of very difficult experiences over a very long period of time to get you to grow. But if you take control of that process and you do that internally, do that inner work, then you kind of go through that whole entire thing much quicker, and therefore you have much more of your life to use for more creative, more positive, more joyful things.
Mm. What would you say? Let's say somebody is capable of naming, identifying a characteristic, a fault that is really has been really, really bad in their own life. But they have been dragging it around for 20 years.
Mhm.
And so far, there has not been any serious attempt to get rid of it. What is that?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. So, well, that's like ignore the cult stuff for now and talk
Mm,
just about your personal issues.
mm,
So, in the course of development, okay, so in some cases it is like an actual like past life holdover, some
okay.
sort of some major trauma thing that happened in a past life, and because it happened outside the current physical body, that means it's so deeply embedded within the psyche that in order to access it, you really have to do some major like deep stuff. Okay, it's like it's very deep in there. It's like a it's like when people get impaled with objects and they have to go to the emergency room or go to the hospital. Sometimes it's just a splinter in the skin. Sometimes it's something that's like way deep in there, and only a surgical opening can extract it. Right. So the same thing with these issues in our psyche. Some of them are so deeply embedded that it's very difficult to get them out, and therefore it takes more inner work in order to resolve it. And I think it seems to me like pretty much everyone who is sold, who is born, has almost like a priority list of different types of issues that they are
Mm,
born with, right? From the ones that are like the core issues that are the hardest to deal with to, the more like lower level things that are sort of easy, like just bad habits, regular bad habits, or some typical reaction that you tend to have to a situation. And then some things are just like very, very deeply seated. And so it's too much for this interview to really go over all the different healing modalities, but they are out there. There are healing modalities that are out there. And so it depends on what your situation is. Like, for example, if you had some sort of a toxic parent who's a narcissist, who's kind of bipolar and psychically feeding on you and all that kind of stuff, that's one issue. If you've got like sexual abuse, that's another issue. If your parents were fine, but you were extremely bullied at school, so now you have no self-confidence, that's another issue, right? So there's all these different types of issues, and you have to go within and look at your own life to the originating event that sort of kicked that off in your life, if it's something that was induced in this life. If it's a past life issue, well, that's harder to resolve. I mean, some people, they do like hypnotic past life regression, and they kind of revisit that original event, and they kind of discharge it emotionally, and then when they come out of it, all of a sudden their life changes because now they've actually addressed the root cause of where that originally came from, which was an actual whole entirely different life. So
mm,
that's another type of healing modality that's out there. But the fact that they're out there just means that you can, depending on your situation, you can read the books, you can check out different healers and systems, and just experiment, see what works, and you'll know what works because you'll feel better, your life will change, and
mm.
so on. So it's just a matter of looking at what's out there and kind of going through it. But yeah, there are definitely core issues that we all have and that we need to deal with. And that's a lot of what our life is about. It's about attracting experiences that challenge us, that challenge us at that core level. And then, over time, whether we do it the hard way through decades of experience, or if we do it the quick way by going within and, looking at the issues and trying to resolve them using various healing modalities, either way, you will come out of it a better person in the end. It's just a question of how long and how much suffering do you want to endure to deal with it. And the other issue, of course, is that not everyone has the same level of conscious sharpness or strength, I guess. I mean, who knows what the reason is? It could be biological. Could have been how much nutrition you had as a kid, or it could be how strong your spirit or soul is, coming into it, depending on how many lives you've had and what you've learned from them. But if you don't have enough conscious power or strength, then there are certain parts of your programming that you can't overcome. And, I mean, that pertains to the whole idea that there's people out there who pretty much have no spirit at all, who are therefore entirely biological and social programming and whatever negative influences work through them. Okay. So they have like zero consciousness. Well, okay, they have some like on the level of an animal, but they have very little consciousness. So therefore they can't do anything about their programming. They're entirely at mercy to it, right? So if you look at people like you and me, okay, now we have some more consciousness, but obviously not enough to deal with all of our personal issues yet, right? But we have enough to get started, to start working on it. But it just illustrates the principle that the stronger your consciousness is, and therefore the more like self-aware and such that you are, the more you can, the better you can override your programming and deal with deeper and deeper issues. So some people, if someone doesn't have the level of conscious strength they need, then there's certain levels of programming they're never going to be able to resolve in this life. But their soul is still going to be worked on the hard way, the long hard way, to deal with it.
Mm. You already talked about change, and we have interesting incoming planetary energies and events. Masaki Miyagawa, when I talked to him, he called it Uranian disruption.
Yeah.
And so what do you see coming down the pike? Mm-hmm. If anything?
Yeah, right. Okay, well, I mean, let me just say generally that when you look at what people are saying about the future, I mean, a lot of it tends to be very doomy, kind of negative, right? Yeah. And that's valid in its own sense, but of course they're only seeing half the picture, which is the negative half. So in conjunction with that negative, there's also the positive component. Okay, so what is the positive component? Well, for example, I mean, even on a small everyday 3D scale, if you look at, for example, the internet and social media, okay, that's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, sure, attention spans are declining and the internet is being used to surveil and profile people. Like if you look at China and the whole like social credit system they got going on, they're monitoring everyone's social media communications, workplace there, and they're using it to give people a social credit score, and therefore they can eliminate people who are disobedient to the government, right? So,
and I think I heard today that maybe starting in December or the next couple of months in China, you will not have access to the internet without facial recognition.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So China is a test bed for what they, I'm talking about the Bilderberg type elites, the whole network. It's what they want for the entire planet. They want to have the entire planet turn into what China is currently. So China is a test bed for that. But so where's I going with this? Oh yeah. So social media, that's the negative double edge. That's the negative side of it. The positive side is that now more than ever, true ideas are being able to be spread through social media to bypass mainstream media, right? And that's the whole idea behind social media and alternative news and such. And so that, in conjunction with people liking and upvoting and so on, and also being able to comment on things, it's a very strong intellectual feedback system that makes things that are true and powerful and need to know rise to the top of a front page. Okay, depending on the demographic of the group. And here I'm talking about like truth seekers. If you go to a stupid thing like Reddit, for example, with a bunch of NPCs and asleep people voting on things, of course, on the front page you're going to see nothing but orange man bad type agendas and all this dumb stuff. But if you look within the demographic of truth seekers, the fact that social media empowers them to share information and upvote things and make the best things rise to the top, that is it's a precursor to what the raw material called a social memory complex, which is basically where an entire species is, telepathically connected to each other and able to share thoughts and memories and lessons. And so it's a very much faster form of evolution through social cooperation. Okay, so that's what social media. That's the positive side of social media, and what that's doing is it's causing fringe truths and fringe material to become increasingly mainstream. Okay. I mean, the internet, for example, is what enabled, like in America in the 2008 election, there was Ron Paul, for example. That's when Ron Paul, who was all anti Federal Reserve, anti, big government, he was an actual like fringe conspiracy character. And he was talking about things that only used to be talked about in the fringe right wing patriot militia movements back in the early 90s. Okay. And all of a sudden by 2008, there was like everyday mainstream people saying, end the Fed, end the Fed. So that's an example of something fringy becoming mainstream through the power of social media and the internet, which, YouTube and then such was starting to really take off around 2008 or so. And so ultimately that's why right now we have the rise of populism. And even like in Hong Kong, the protests and such like that is because no longer are people bound to be only programmed by big mainstream media companies. They're able to share information with each other. So that's an example of a positive trend where there's an increasing number of catalysts that are exposing people to new information that's forcing them to choose what side they want to take, truth or lie, for example. And anyone in a post can post links to research, to other authors, books, videos. And it's the level of growth and awareness development is so fast now compared to what it used to be 20 years ago. Before the age of the internet, really, that it's amazing, and it's actually changing human history in a positive sense in that sense. But it's only positive for the fringe truth seeker demographic for the most part, and some of it kind of leaking out into the mainstream. The negative side of it, though, is that you've got the other portion of the population, the ones who are incapable of awakening, who for whom social media is it's making them even dumber. It's reinforcing their false biases even more. It's turning them into a zombie horde that's following whatever the CNN or whatever these news companies are telling them to believe. Okay, so that's why they're in the streets beating up people that they disagree with and being so rabid about it, and willing to commit terrorist acts in the name of what they believe is social justice or whatever, all because they're so asleep and they're programmed by these big media companies. So what are we seeing there? We're seeing the minority of truth seekers getting smarter, more aware, more capable. And we're seeing the rest of them who are not truth seekers at all, who don't even care about the truth, who are just, operating on emotions and programming, getting worse and worse and worse. So that is a polarization phenomenon, society being divided into two. And I think that trend will continue for quite a while, So yeah, I mean, that is the general gist of what's going to happen. Now, to that, you have to add a lot of the political things that are happening. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get too much into that, but for example, there's all this talk about Trump, for example, taking down the deep state. And I mean, that's a whole thing in itself. And I think as I might have said before, probably, I mean, there are a lot of criminal activities that are currently being under investigation and under prosecution, and then they will come out more and more, and there will be people going to jail. But even if that happens, even let's say if Trump becomes the savior of the world, or some people believe, even if that happens, I'm saying theoretically, right?
Yeah.
Even if that happens, what comes after that? What's going to come after that is that he's going to be instrumental in releasing a lot of black ops, secret military projects into public use, creating a kind of economic golden age of sorts. Even if that happens, what's going to come of that? Well, what's going to come of that is you're going to have, once again, a global, technocratic, technologically advanced surveillance state in the name of peace and progress. Okay, so you're still ending up with that scenario, whether it's Trump taking down the current deep state or not. Because in truth, even if Trump, even if 1,000 people get sent down to Guantanamo Bay or get executed or whatever for crimes against America and treason and such, that's only the surface level. I mean, you're not taking down the true breakaway civilization in their underground bases that have, manufactured humanoids on the surface running politics. You don't have that whole entire level even being addressed by any of that stuff. So whatever happens, it's most likely going to be a takedown of the surface level conspiracy. And therefore, we still have to be aware of what's underneath that, and therefore what's going to try to control things after the supposed, revolution. So that's another component. The other component, of course, is any sort of a weather type cataclysm. It could be asteroid impacts, it can be a galactic superwave like Paul the Violet talks about. Any of these cosmic events, they can still happen. And the funny thing is, if they were to happen, it would make all this political stuff that's going on right now pointless. It's like everything, all this political stuff you see in the news, everything people are freaking out about is so small compared to any of the cosmic events that could be coming up. And if we look in human history, if you look at archaeological records, we're looking at, sudden ice ages, volcanic disruptions, plagues, things that are just like a big punch to the face of humanity. And like I said, that's going to make a lot of this political stuff happening now kind of pointless. So that's another reason why I don't think people should get too wrapped up in what they see on the news now, is because so much of it is soap opera that, it's going to work itself out. And I think we have to be more concerned about the bigger cosmic, spiritual, metaphysical issues and trends that are going on, because I think that's what is going to matter in the long run. I mean, that's what's going to influence the future of the human race. The alien factor, the cosmic disaster factor, and also like the whole spiritual, I don't want to say ascension, but almost like spiritual mega evolution, which seems to be in its early phases right now. But if you look at the progress of spiritual awakening throughout the 50s, 60s through the 90s, it was like an exponential curve. So it's kind of slow, kind of moving up. But now we're in this like phase where it's gonna kind of go in that direction. And the only way it can go in that direction is if there are catalysts. I don't want to say just in the news, but like on a planetary scale, catalysts that shock us into awakening. And what kind of revelations? Well, just things being revealed. I mean, back in the old days, someone had to pick up a book by David Icke to learn about secret societies and the alien presence and shadowing by reptilians and such. But now that level of information is available like way more easily on the internet. Anyone can pass a link on social media, and someone can get educated on that. But at the same time, there's not yet, for example, the president at 8 p.m. on the news or on television talking about, oh yeah, aliens are real, and we've been in contact with them for 50 years, and so on and so forth, right? That event, if that event were ever to happen, which is the disclosure event, that's a thing that would unlock the entire field of alien research that currently exists to way more of the general population. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about as a catalyst. It's something that allows information to spread and be believed in and be dealt with and thought about in a way more effective way. So I think our future is going to be filled with greater and greater catalysts of all types. It can be, very dark things being revealed. It can be very positive things being revealed. And it's spreading, not just from the fringe, but more into the mainstream. And people having to basically adjust everything that they believe in. They have to think, they have to reconfigure their world belief. And that's what it's going to take humanity into any sort of higher level. It can be done in a very slow way, like, we're just going to publish more books and we're going to do more speaking tours. And that's only ever going to talk to the choir. In order to actually reach general humanity, you have to have major catalysts that kind of like, it's almost like a syringe injecting, the fluid of truth into the body of the general population. And that can only happen through major crisis, shocking revolution type events, whether it's on the news, whether it's, if a supernova happens and knocks out our power grid, for example, that's going to change people's entire lives, because now they don't have football and soccer on TV anymore to distract them. Now they actually have to start thinking about real life. and if other weird things are happening, like, alien ships are flying overhead, now they got to start thinking about that. So I think life in reality is just going to get weirder and weirder and more shocking as time goes on, and that's part of the awakening process.
Yeah, personally, I'm not waiting for any government to, reveal disclosure. Are you waiting for that? I don't.
No, I'm not waiting for it. I mean, here's the thing: if disclosure ever happens, if the government actually goes on TV and says aliens are real, people are okay. It's only going to be partial disclosure, which means they're going to admit that aliens exist. They might say how long they've been here, but they're not going to say exactly who they are and what they want and what their plans for humanity are, or what their actual true dealings with the government were over the past 100 years. Like I don't think anyone's going to get on TV and say, yeah, we've been working with aliens for 100 years, and we made a deal where they gave us cool technology. That's why you have the internet now. But in exchange, we allowed them to eat and abduct, about 2% of people, per year or something like that, right?
Yeah.
They're never going to admit that part.
No.
They're going to keep that. They're going to keep that under wraps, and they're going to spin it in whatever way is politically convenient.
Yeah.
And so that's why no matter what happens during disclosure, just keep in mind that it's going to be partial, and there's going to be a major, heavy spin to it. And the reason why I say that is because, as we know, governments, they are by nature power hungry. We know that they do what is convenient, like politically convenient for themselves. So if they ever had to make deals with alien powers to preserve themselves, to get technology, whatever, they would have done so, right? And they would also be willing to lie during disclosure in order to try to keep themselves together and keep their control over the population together as much as possible to prevent panic. So that's why truth is going to be the first casualty upon disclosure. That's guaranteed. That's guaranteed. And then for that reason, that's why I wrote my Discerning Alien Disinformation book, which is also a free article series on my website. It's under the alien section. And it's a 6-part series where I went through the trouble of reading through so many alien disinformation books out there and figuring out like what the common deception patterns were and what we can do to see through them. So that's a really awesome series. And yeah, that book actually had a pretty strong influence on things. Like even I think the Exopolitics Institute, that book kind of circulated around there. And before that book, people were kind of they had good relations with each other just because, we're all trying to explore alien stuff and we're trying to go towards disclosure, even though some people were more like for pro-grays, pro like alien deception type stuff, and other ones weren't. They could all get along. But when the book came out, it acted sort of as a catalyst where it kind of exposed one side's shenanigans about what they're really up to. And so, of course, there were some major disagreements that broke out between members because it highlighted the divisions, okay? And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, in order to put that truth on the table so that people can discuss it if they want to. And also in the event that if there ever was a disclosure event, that this book would exist out there already in hard copy, pretty widely circulated, where people could then just, flip to that page and say, see what those aliens are saying on the news? That's like number 4 on the list of this book. And I'm not sure that'll ever happen, but if it does, well, there you go. Now there's a resource out there where it can open discussion. So that's another reason why truth seekers need to keep doing what they're doing, keep spreading information, is because even though you can't convince, let's say, your neighbor or the general population, what you're doing is you're seeding information out there and you're preparing minds so that if a catalyst ever were to occur that opens people's minds to that possibility, now they have already been immunized to that thing, And I think like movies and TV shows kind of also do that because they do it under the guise of fiction, right? So people watch these shows, and it doesn't matter if you don't believe in aliens or UFOs. You watch a show about that, you're like, this is really entertaining. It's interesting. Yeah, these grays here, they do seem to be bad guys according to the show. And they start thinking about that, even though it's all a fictional universe in their minds, right? But with the one day, boom, when it becomes real, now they have a little bit of context to
they have a
that.
point of reference that is like in this TV series.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just like with the Matrix movies. Funny enough, they came out in like 1998 or 9, I think. Yeah, and even to this day, people are still using memes and references to that movie as part of their conceptual framework for discussing ideas. I talk about the Matrix control system. Yeah. Well, that term, right? It came from those movies, but it pertains to a real thing because those movies themselves were referencing actual real truths.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, like I said, if you can't act, if you can't convince right now, you can still prepare yourself and you can prepare other people, in subtle ways. That's pretty much it.
You mentioned the split of society. The ones that are not capable of waking up and the ones that slowly but gradually do. What is the split for?
All right, so
because there are so many funny ideas out there that the Earth will split into 2 planets, or the collapse of particular timelines, and on it goes.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I need to say about that is, so duality and opposition and opposites, fighting and things like that. there are so many false versions of that out there, right? Like for example, atheists versus Christians, or whatever the pro evolution people versus the pro Bible people, and all that kind of stuff. And so many of these things is where both sides have problems. Both sides are bad in their own way, right? And then they're just pointing at each other's bad parts, and trying to that's what creates unity amongst themselves and division against each other. Okay, so there's a lot of the split out there that's not part of the actual true spiritual split that I'm talking about. See, the only true spiritual split in my mind is those who stand for spirit, consciousness, truth, awareness, and those who don't. Those who are actually against that, because they're actually in favor of ego programming, just their own shadow material. So really, it's an external societal manifestation of what's happening microcosmically internally, with our own consciousness being suspended between our own higher spirit and our own shadow lower ego type issues. Okay, so that whole duality is manifesting externally in society itself too, right? It's just that it takes so many different forms, and a lot of these dualities out there that are right now in society are false. So we shouldn't fall for those, and we should keep in mind that it's really about spirit versus anti-spirit. That's how I perceive it. Okay, yeah. So can you reiterate your question, because I totally got off on a totally different thing there.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, I said that there are very funny ideas out there that
Oh,
we
right.
will have two planets, that
Mm-hmm.
certain timelines will collapse,
Yeah.
or there will be a harvesting, and even
Mm-hmm.
around that subject of harvesting, there is a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
In general, harvest is a good word. You planted food, now you're going to pick it.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, when it comes to DNA harvesting, soul harvesting, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Yeah. So regarding the whole timeline split idea, so we know from the alien subject, for example, that aliens, they seem to exist in a parallel semi-physical type reality, and they can project themselves here. That's why they can walk through walls. That's why they can make their ships invisible. That's why they can be standing right behind me right now, and it won't show up on camera. And unless I'm, intuitive or clairvoyant, or have a little psychic guard kitty that can detect them, they can be there invisible, because they're slightly phased out from our physical reality. So the question is, what reality are they from? What level of reality is that? And can we ourselves ever go there? Okay, so that's the idea of this whole timeline split, the idea, or the whole idea of ascension. Now there's so much New Age poisoning surrounding the idea of ascension, but even I mean, the whole New Age thing, I mean, it came out of the whole theosophical and other spiritualism movements of the 1800s, and then eventually got transformed even more by the whole 60s hippie movement. The whole Age of Aquarius, golden age type thinking that was going on back there, most of which was actually engineered by the powers that be, for
Yeah.
to deviate, to hijack the awakening process, and and eventually they
Esalen
corrupted.
Institute
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So the ideas of ascension have been corrupted heavily by all of that. Okay, but even if you ignore all that for a moment, if you go back in time to ancient prophecies, even like Zoroastrianism, which is like thousands of years old, even it talks about an eventual what do you call it, a schism of some kind of eschatological revelation, change of humanity, where the end of this program that we're in right now, this collective dream, like the ending of it, and the emerging into a higher, truer reality. Okay, so so the idea of something like that happening in our future, it's based in a very, very long, deep, ancient tradition, from even the Gnostics to even some Oriental Hindu type things. They all talk about it. So I think if we're going to dismiss the idea of ascension, I think we should only dismiss the New Age corrupted form of it. And what's corrupted about it is the idea that basically everyone on Earth will be suddenly spiritually awakened, and all of a sudden, lamb and lion will lay side by side. Everything will be peaceful and harmonious. When in reality, it's not going to be that gentle, and in reality, not everyone makes it to that higher level. Okay, and it's not based on moral judgment, or you're not a Christian, therefore you're going to burn in hell. It's not that kind of thing. I'm talking more about what if people are either 100% committed to the dark side, to, I mean, just people out there doing horrible things, right? I mean,
Mm.
bad stuff. And you just open the news, go to any tabloid and Daily Mail, whatever, you can read the bad things that are going on. I think some people are just not even spirited or souled enough to have something in them to awaken. It's not that they're asleep, it's that they are zombies. They're empty, they're vampires. Okay, those people cannot be awakened and all of a sudden go into a higher reality. Plus, in addition to that, you've also got people who are sold, but they've chosen the dark side. So, I mean, if you look at material like I don't know, the raw material, law of one type stuff. I mean, they also talk about this whole idea of harvest, right? But in their context, a harvest is more about like a graduation. It's like, okay, we've had this many students go into the school, and only this many actually learn the lessons and developed enough that now they can graduate high school Earth, for example. That's what their idea of the harvest is. But at the same time, we also know that from the alien stuff that aliens have their own idea of the harvest, and I don't know. It's pretty grim stuff. I mean, sure, why not? Okay, I'll just go ahead and say it. So if the Earth, let's say, if the timelines were to split, and let's say a portion of the population were to go into a higher positive reality, then if the old Earth, the one that we're currently on right now, that's going to be left, still continues, there are many sources that talk about it basically becoming destroyed. Okay, let's say through I don't know, through some sort of a comet impact or volcanic activity, pole shift. I mean, who knows, right? But if I were an alien, and if I were to look at Earth and say, okay, well, this many people, percentage of the population is going to go to a higher dimensional reality, and the rest of them are going to be left behind, and they're going to die in a mass cataclysm, then I, as a resourceful alien, would say, well, why don't we use those people for our own purpose? Why don't we harvest them for biological material, for fluids, for whatever? So if a split were to occur, then what happens to the old Earth? What happens to the population that's on it? What if aliens then were to come in and say, okay, well, if you guys aren't going to take them, how about we'll take them? And they start abducting people. They process their fluids to create their own hybrids to see it on other planets. I mean, who knows? So, the harvest has both positive and negative connotations. And those two connotations are not at odds with each other, because you can simultaneously have people that are dimensionally elevated to a higher positive timeline, in addition to the rest of the people basically being recycled, biologically recycled, or wiped out in Earth, becoming a burning cinder in that particular timeline. Yeah, it's kind of negative, and there's a lot of nuance surrounding it. So I don't want to sound too doomy. I don't want to make people think, like, oh crap, what if I'm going to be turned into an alien sausage one day? If you actually go by what some of the more reliable sources are saying regarding this, basically, if you're someone who if you're someone who generally is an okay person, you don't try to really screw anyone over on purpose and really torture animals. If you're not one of those people, then you don't have to worry about it. It's not like only the top 1% are gonna make it into heaven. As the term might be. No, it's just more like, as long as you're not of the dark side, then you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought of a sanction. To me, it sounded always a little bit like a spin-off of the Rapture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even there, you have very contradicting ideas. That you have those groups that say that's not even in the Bible, the word rapture. And it is probably not a good thing, because when we look back at this analogy with the days of Noah, yeah, it will be like in the days of Noah. Then Noah and his family survived, and they were here. They were not taken away. Protected, secluded, yes, but not taken away. And in that sense, when you look at it from that angle, then maybe that scripture, one was left here, the other one was taken. Maybe that taken is not even a positive idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so basically, if disasters were ever to strike Earth, or if alien ships showed up, and even if it were a human-looking alien group, and they sent all their ships down, and the doors open, and they basically said, "Everyone, get in. We're going to save you." The question is, are you going to get on that ship? Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Exactly. Although I always joke, if I have to choose between drowning in a giant tsunami or getting on an alien ship, if I were to get on the ship, even if they were to turn me into alien sausage, at least I'd have one chance to punch a gray in the face before I die. So therefore, I probably would take it. But no,
Okay.
I'm joking. I'm kind of half kidding there.
Yeah.
But it's going to take an extreme level of psychic discernment to be able to tell who that particular alien group is. So those who don't have the discernment, who are gullible, who are kind of desperate, they will get on the ship. And in that sense, it almost acts as a filter for picking up all the programmed people who don't have the ability to tell who's who. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That is another question. Should we go to the ships? Personally, no. What anybody else does is their business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the entire idea that the aliens are going to rescue us and they are going to whisk us away.
Yeah. Now, if you're already an abductee or contactee, your group is, if they deem you useful, they'll probably try to save you, and they might already have that plan in mind. So one of the abduction patterns, things that abductees are trained and told on, is basically the idea that there will be a mass disaster one day. It's going to affect a lot of people on Earth, and Earth is not going to be good to be on for a while. So the idea is that one day during the disaster, you're going to be taken away. A ship's going to show up. You're going to get on it, and you're going to be taken elsewhere to basically network with other abductees and contactees and choose mates, create families, and then you're going to be trained, dumped back on Earth sometime later to restart civilization. Okay. But the only question is, okay, well, what Earth are they on? Is it the old negative timeline Earth? Did it somehow survive? And now these people who didn't go on to a higher dimension are going to be put back on there to continue it? Or is that the actual truth behind the positive, the whole ascension idea, that there is no dimensional ascension? It's just people being taken by aliens and then being returned to restart civilization, just like the whole Noah idea. And the answer to that is, I don't know yet. I mean, there's too many variables to calculate, and it's kind of too far off in the future anyway. I mean, even if it's in our lifetime, there's so much that has to happen before that point that I find it not too critical to try to analyze in depth, just because we just don't know. We'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah. And relax. And relax. Yeah. Don't run around like a headless chicken.
Right. Yeah, I mean, seriously, because some people, their number one source of stress in their lives is the news.
Yeah.
And if they look at what's happening in the news, and if they compare that to how much of that is actually happening in their personal lives, like, just open the door, look outside the window, how much of that is happening in your neighborhood, in your town, you find that so much of what's in the news has no bearing whatsoever on what's happening right now in your life. So why are you so stressed out? Why are you acting like a traumatized war orphan, looking at all these war stories, when in your own life you're like sitting there, eating potato chips like nothing's happening? Get a sense of reality. I mean, if your life is relatively calm, then ground yourself in reality around you. And if there's something on the news that you can do something about it, and you feel like you have to do something about it, then sure, go ahead and do it. But if you can't, I mean, there's really no point in getting yourself super wrapped up about it. I mean, you're better off just meditating and sending compassion in that direction than typing away angrily on a keyboard in a comment section of a news article, which doesn't really do anyone any good.
Yeah, that's true. So, Tom, to wrap it up, this is just my personal curiosity. And you can answer as you wish. You can say no comment. You can say yes or no without any explanation, or you can elaborate if you wish to. Have you been in the Orion Wars?
The Orion Wars. See, that doesn't ring a bell. However, it depends on how you define the Orion Wars. If you're talking about an actual, very long, ongoing intergalactic war between forces of darkness and light, if that's what you mean by that, then I would have to say yes. But I would say yes, not as a matter of me remembering it right now, but just as a matter of resonance and just logical deduction based on what I feel like I'm compelled to do in this life. I mean, for example, exposing a portion of the alien deception through my
Mhm.
Discerning Alien Disinformation book. That was a very, 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 very strong drive within me to do that. And so therefore, if it's that strong of a drive, then obviously, probably, it was a matter of one of the things that I came here to do.
Mm.
And why would I come here to do that unless I had some sort of a past history involved with the whole like alien agenda, you
Yeah.
know? So based on that kind of deduction, I would say yes, most likely. And I'm not the only one. I'm sure there's a lot of people involved in it. And if you are involved in it, you would probably be someone who is interested in the issues of, you know, freedom versus tyranny,
Yeah.
awareness versus, you know, deception, and possibly even have a level of alien interest, you know, in that subject in your life. So if you have all those qualities, then yeah, probably. You know,
Mm.
it's a team effort. You know, it's not just one person coming here as some sort of a Rambo trying to take down the alien.
No, 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 no. There are many here.
Right.
Yeah, not like, you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scattered
I thought
around.
you were gonna ask, like, you know, so Tom, are you human? And I would
No,
have been
no,
like,
no, no,
no,
no,
no comment.
no, 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 no,
I'm kidding.
no, no, no. That is not what I was aiming at.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tom, thank you so much for coming. Wonderful conversation once again.
Yeah. It was great.
I will have to listen to that several times. Many, many good points that you brought up. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah. I appreciate the questions. Always good questions.
Okay, so my friends, this was it. Night flight for today. Take good care of yourself, and until next time.